Are you a fan of the finest up-and-coming filmmakers that Scotland and the rest of the world has to offer? Then look no further than the Glasgow Film Festival, Glasgow short film, that Scotland and the rest of the world has to offer. Then look no further than the Glasgow Film Festival. Shit. It's a bit tatty, isn't it? Look no further than the Glasgow Glasgow Short Film Festival. I'll do that again, but the list for. You told me that this was a trailer for the Glasgow Film Festival. I shouldn't be doing this. Glasgow Film Festival, yes. The Edinburgh Film Festival, I pushed. But the Glasgow Short Film Festival, no. You listen to me. They're just diddy wee films. Things about your granny or your drunk dad. Guaranteed there'll be some foreign animation that nobody understands. That'll be winning a prize, don't you worry about that. Are you a fan of the finest up-and-coming filmmakers that Scotland and the rest of the world has to offer? Then look no further than the Glasgow Short Film Festival 2021. Give a lick of paint.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this live Q&A for Scottish Competition 2, A World to Win. My name is Sanne Jehoul, and I'm delighted to be joined by all 6 filmmakers in this programme tonight. So introducing them and give us a wee wave, Laura Carrera, Director of The Shift, Julia Canducci, Director of Against the Tide, Adam Castle, Director of Loopy Loopy Loo, Caitlin Black, Director of 12th Man, Laura Wadha, Director of Isle of Us, and Douglas King, Director of Do No Harm. So this is a program about characters trying to get by, trying to find their place, often in a world that isn't necessarily accommodating to them. If you haven't seen the films, they are available on demand at our festival hub until the end of the week, and you can vote for them until Sunday at 4:30 p.m. If you have any questions during this Q&A for any of the filmmakers, you can tweet them to @GlasgowShort, or you can email questions at questions@glasgowshort.org. And if you're watching the stream on Facebook, you can also put your questions in the comments and we can pick them up there. I'd like to thank Louisa McDade, who is providing live captions for us tonight, and Polona Kuzman, who is running the live stream. And also this Q&A will stay up on our hub for the rest of the week. So if you know anyone who's interested and couldn't make it tonight, that's where they'll go. And yeah, thank you all very much for being here. We'll kick off and we'll go in order of the program, and then I can come back for specific questions. But so I basically quite shamelessly took this program title from a podcast I really love. So I hope that they see it as a nod of appreciation. But I thought it really united the themes in all your films quite well, and it has sort of a note of resilience to it. So with that theme in mind, as a general first question for all of you, I was wondering if you could maybe talk about where your project started and where the idea came from, what your aim was. So Laura Carrera, we'll start with you.
Hi. So for me, I think it was a combination of elements. It started out with kind of me wanting to continue the work that I was doing already in my previous short with Red Hill and kind of addressing our dependency on work. With Red Hill, it was more to do with someone who was about to retire. So it was more to do with kind of dependency on in terms of meaning, on how you drive meaning from your life. But yeah, later on, I realized that this dependency actually starts very much early on. And instead, it starts as a financial dependency. And so I wanted to kind of continue to explore the same topic, but with a younger character. Then also, I mean, I think the idea kind of developed from there. And then there was quite a few other elements that, I don't know, just started to kind of gather. And I don't know, when you kind of have an idea in mind, you then look around and you start getting all these ideas from other elements that you sometimes wouldn't think are connected. So for example, the dog was also another image that is kind of, I've had that image from when I was young, when I saw a dog getting abandoned. And later when I was starting to write the film, there was also this video online that was getting a lot of really, really nasty comments, as we are to expect from online videos. And so all of these things then started to kind of influence the writing process. That led me to the shift.
Thank you. Julia?
Hi, everyone. So I guess I've always been really interested in alternative lifestyles. And there was a specific time in my life when I was feeling a bit like in the Truman Show kind of thing, you know, like where everyone is acting the same and we're all like working to pay rent and bills. And I thought, well, there must be another way. It's not necessarily like my way, but I just want to investigate other lifestyles. And so I discovered this beautiful island on the west of Scotland that not many people know of, and it's called Airade. And they try to live as sustainably as possible. They grow their own food. And they work as a community, and even like sharing tasks and machine. And I thought it was really beautiful and inspiring. And I got in contact with them, and they decide everything as a community. So it wasn't a straight yes. It was like, okay, we'll talk in our meetings and like let you know. So it was quite stressful and like trying to convince them to let me go there. But in the end they said yes, and I'm very grateful they did, because it kind of like opened my mind. And so I went there first in 2019. Initially was supposed to be a project for the university that I was doing at the time, and then it didn't work out. And then the following year I applied for the Bridging the Gap with the Scottish Documentary Institute, and I got the commission. So that was really exciting. And I guess my idea has always been like, when you make a documentary, you kind of open a window to another world, whatever that is. And it's just really, really nice that there is another way. You don't necessarily want to live like them, but it's good to know that there is an option. So yeah, that was my motivation, I guess, and still is my motivation.
Amazing. Thank you. Adam?
Hi there. So the film in the festival is called Loopy Loopy Loo, and it's a 5-minute musical about the illness lupus, which is an illness that I have. And when I was making the film, it'd been over a decade since I had been diagnosed with lupus, and in that time I'd never researched lupus further than the basics that I needed to know for myself. And I remembered when I was diagnosed, I was considered to be a special rare case. And doctors came and looked at me, and they put me in textbooks and they gave presentations about me. And I remember feeling very much on show. And I also remember distinct memories of hospital curtains being closed and opened around me as different people came to sort of look at me. So when I came to make this film, I thought it's probably time for me to do something about lupus. And a few things I knew were that lupus meant wolf in Latin and butterfly. Butterfly is an image that is associated with lupus. I also knew that Lady Gaga supposedly had lupus. So I had pop songs and animal imagery in my mind. And eventually I worked with a lupus expert to research lupus for the first time. And the result is actually a film that's more about the experience of diagnosis than the experience of lupus. And echoing that experience of being on show, it's in an empty theatre space. And the characters are dressed up in these outlandish costumes, and the whole thing sort of references my other world, and in which I run queer cabaret nights. And in the film, the characters embody the illness, they diagnose each other with the illness, they try and get on stage, they don't quite. And yeah, that film is the result of that process.
Thank you. Caitlin?
Hi everyone. So I'm the director of 12 Man, which is basically a story about two boys in a grassroots football team in Glasgow. And it's all about kind of their changing relationship with each other, and I suppose how they fit into their team. And so I guess my journey started when Jack Gemmell, who's the writer of our short, came to me with this idea from his experiences kind of growing up in grassroots football, and how toxic sometimes that, or most of the time, that kind of experience is. And so yeah, I got really excited because I think most of my shorts so far have really been about kind of living in isolation and kind of on the edge of whatever your space is or where you are. And I kind of thought it would be super interesting to explore, I suppose, like this kind of subtext land where, you know, these two boys are suppressing essentially like who they are and like everything about themselves, and how we could, I suppose, tell that story through eye contact. And so that's kind of where it started with me. And I really like working with writers. So yeah, we collaborated together quite a lot on that. And I probably would quite like to go into a lot more about the journey of where we went later, but yeah, that's it.
Yes, I'll definitely touch on that. Going to Laura, what have now?
Hello, I'm the director of Isle of Us, and the film is about Munzer, who is a Syrian barber living on a remote island in Scotland called the Isle of Bute. And the film started when I was at NFTS. It's my grad film, and I've previously made a short film about my Syrian cousins. I'm half Scottish, half Syrian. My mum's Scottish and my dad's Syrian, and I made a film about my two little cousins coming from Syria to Sweden during the refugee crisis. And when I was at NFTS, I remember my dad telling me that there were Syrians being relocated on Bute. And I was kind of just like perplexed. It's such a random place. So I went there, and that's where I met Munzer. And it was like sort of instant. We just started talking about like my memories of my holidays there and places that we'd been. And when I saw the people coming into the shop, they're like Scottish men with beards and everything going in there with the Arabic music in the background. I just kind of was like, it felt like the two sides of myself meeting, like the Scottish and the Syrian. And yeah, I started making the film about it then.
Yeah, we need to talk about the nose waxing, I think. Okay, last, Douglas.
Hopefully I don't need any nose waxing just now. I'm a director of Do No Harm, and Rosie Barnes, who wrote Do No Harm, she got in touch with me. She sent me an email about a couple of days before the SFTN deadline, Scottish Film Talent Network deadline for the new talent shorts, asking if I would be interested in this idea that she would just like to throw in. And what really intrigued me about it was the personal story behind it as to how Rosie came up with the idea. And the big attraction for me is that I think that most of my films is really about the kind of the juxtaposition between if you're feeling depressed or anxious or you're going through something, that when you're going through it in your own headspace, it's the most important, most serious thing ever. And then as soon as you look at it from an objective angle, like a wide shot, effectively, it looks borderline absurd. So I think I was able to sort of find my way in through that. But really, it was just a fascinating story through Rosie's experience. It was so extreme that I thought there was loads that we could do with it. Originally, it was set in a morgue, and I think it was around about the time of Novichok. So we were talking about this place called Porton Down, which was this really mysterious lab where we'd got to the bottom of what this chemical was. So I suggested to Rosie that we shift the location to this lab where it's going to be something really dangerous, in contrast to this. At the time, it wasn't a sandwich. I think it was a brush or something that we had on the go, and Rosie was up for that quite quickly. And as soon as that happened, I thought, oh, we're going to collaborate very, very well. And I think we had a challenging but a great experience together, working together, making that film.
Great, thank you. So on to some more specific questions. And again, Laura, I'm going to start with you. I think you're packing in quite a lot of depth in your narrative without much dialogue, apart from the phone call at the end, really. And I was wondering if that was always sort of your intention of how you developed it, to have it that minimum.
Yeah, I knew there was going to be this one moment that was going to change her life completely, and it was going to turn everything upside down. So I knew that I was going to work a lot with that specific moment and how the change was so immediate, and how she lost control from one moment to the next. But yeah, the supermarket sequence, that part, I really just wanted to keep it as close as possible to the experience of shopping in a supermarket, because I think that experience can already be so, I don't know, it can reveal so much about ourselves already, you know, what we picked, the products we can afford, also little elements even about the kind of the space, you know, how people lower themselves to go to the lower kind of the cheapest items, you know, the reduced to clear items, all of that. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to really just create these little moments where we see these other characters and where we get a little sense of who she is. But I think a crucial moment as well is that I didn't really want us to know the extent to which she was struggling right from the beginning. And so I think, you know, so that by the time we get to the call, it is something that is shocking to us, but is also shocking to her. And we don't really know the extent to which this is going to affect her life. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought it was also, I mean, I'm really happy that we've got your film in particularly this year, because we also have this Absurdity of Labor program. And I think your film would have, you know, fit very easily into that. So I'm also curious, because that's sort of in response to the last year. So I'm kind of curious to how you look at the film and your sort of interest in those subjects after this year, where that's all been exacerbated to such an extent.
Yeah, I mean, it only got more relevant, I think, because so many people lost their jobs and saw that immediacy of the struggle, you know, from one moment you're in control, the next you're not. And so I think it became more and more relevant, but to a degree, it shouldn't be news. It shouldn't come as news to us. Everyone that had these sorts of contracts was already in those situations. It just happened that this year this happened on a massive scale. So it became more visible. But I don't think it should come as a surprise. You know what I mean? So I think, yeah, to a degree, we didn't guess what was happening. You know, we didn't saw into the future. We just saw a situation that was already pretty much happening at the time. So yeah.
And on a lighter note, how was it having to work with a dog as an actor?
Not great. I was advised already from the beginning that it wasn't a good idea. But yeah, we had it in the script, so there was no working around it. It was hard, but yeah, we found our ways. I'm not sure if I would do it again. I think next time I just won't write any dogs in scripts, because it took a lot of shots, but we did get there.
I mean, I think he did a great job, or she, I don't know. There's a question for you as well from Ben Hector, saying, what conversations did you have with Anna before the shoot, and how did you get such a vulnerable performance? He said he loves the film. So.
Thank you. So with Anna, I think from the very beginning, I was very clear to her on what the intentions of the film were. And I think that for me is always important. I know that there's like some methods of working with actors where it's all kind of, I don't know, about lying to them and about not being entirely open about what's going to happen, etc. But I don't know, I tend to find that it's just, you know, easier to just be open, as open as you can to your actress. And I think Anna as well, she understood that element of, you know, from one moment to the other, you might not have a job. I think a lot of actors understand that lifestyle in a way. For our industry, we all could understand that, any freelancer. So I think, yeah, from an actor's perspective as well, she understood it on an individual basis. And then I think Anna is just very talented. So it's also very easy to work with someone that is that talented. And we did rehearsals in the beginning. We tried, I don't know, different versions. And I got the producer to be the voice, you know, that we don't hear in the film, but that Anna is listening to when she is performing. And we did like some improvisation during the rehearsal period. And that was really interesting because even in one of the improvisations, the producer, Mary, actually gave her the job back. And so the script changed, and I was like, no, you can't do that. But she was like, no, but I just felt so bad telling her no. I just decided to say yes. I was like, okay, well, we're gonna have to adapt, and we can't have that anymore. But I think she was just feeling so terrible, you know, in this role that she couldn't help herself but change it, which I thought it was quite interesting as well. But yeah, and then during the shoot, we also used Mary as the voice on the other side, because I think it really helped having those moments when Anna is listening. I think those actually ended up being really strong moments as well for her performance, because you don't know what is being said, but you have a sense of the impact that is having in her as a character and what's going to mean for her. So yeah.
Great, thank you very much. So we'll move on to Julia. I first actually want to ask how you found your main subject, Jill, and how you sort of what conversations you had with her beforehand in terms of her desire to be part of this community.
Well, I guess I got in contact with the community first in 2019, and then I said that I wanted to make a documentary about the island, and because it was a short documentary, I needed to have a narrative. So I asked them if there was any plan of having new members, or someone leaving, some sort of change inside the community. And they said that they were actually going to welcome this new, she wasn't a member at that time, obviously. She was just going to be like a long-term guest and then go into the trial period. And funnily enough, I was supposed to film something different, because I was supposed to be filming a year ago now when lockdown happened. And Jill was the last person to take the last ferry to Mao before everything shut down. And I was about to go with her. So sometimes I'm even thinking, like, what would have happened if I went with her? You know, I might have spent the whole lockdown with her and the community, which would have been like an interesting lockdown. Anyway, that didn't happen because we decided not to go just literally the last minute the day before. And because everything was evolving so fast, and so we kept in contact with the community, obviously. And then once we knew that the fundings were still there for us when the first lockdown ended, then we got in contact again. And then they said, I asked, is there anything else happening? And they said, well, actually now Jill is coming to the end of her trial membership, and we're gonna have they call it an attunement, so like a final ceremony where they're gonna decide if she can stay or not. And so I thought, well, this is actually a really nice moment to be filming. And so I asked if I could go during that period, and so I did.
And what was, I mean, when you were in touch with them about documenting them, and then, you know, your time there, how was it, you know, being amongst them? Were they quite generous with access, or, you know, were there reservations about what you were showing and what spaces you were in, I guess?
I guess in general, I had the advantage that the first time I went in 2019, and so they trusted me because they saw how I was working, and I was very respectful of their space. But still, when I was there this time, some of the new members, they were a bit shy. They weren't really sure, and actually, there is even a moment when I said, you know, I really need to film this last ceremony that you're gonna have, this attunement, because otherwise my documentary won't, you know, have a meaning if I don't have that final moment. And some of the members were unhappy with that. And then I said, well, I'm gonna have to do something about this. So I really didn't know what to do. I was just like panicking and crying. And then they have morning meetings every morning where everyone can speak. And so because we were living with them, I had the chance to talk. And normally I wouldn't talk. I would just sit and listen to whatever they were saying. But that morning I felt like it really came from my heart. And I said, sorry, but I need to say something this morning, you know. And I spoke from my heart, and I said, I totally understand why you don't want me to film. But, you know, the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to show how you live. And it's not like, I don't want you to think that this is an exploitation or anything. I'm not like hiding anything from you. It's just, honestly, I'm genuinely interested in this, and I care about the community, and I care about you. So if you don't want me to film, I mean, there's nothing I can do about it, but, you know. And then in the end, we reached a compromise. So we filmed from the outside, but through the window, but we managed to mic Jill up. So we had the sound and everything, so that worked really well. And so in the end, they actually were really, really grateful. They said, you should have said this from the beginning, you know, because we didn't understand. Like, we thought somehow making a documentary is just showing up somewhere with the camera and filming, but it's not like that. And so they were really grateful.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, beyond what you have in the film, like, did you have any conversation? I mean, do you have an understanding of that 6-month trial process of, you know, what is important, and you know, what would be the reason that someone doesn't get accepted, I guess?
I guess it's yeah, it's not really like not being accepted. It's like a mutual, it's a conversation. So it's more about like if the person after 6 months realizes that's not the place for her, and if the community says maybe this person is not the right fit for the community, you know, it's like it comes from both sides. So it's, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on to Adam. So Adam, so you're saying about, you know, you were diagnosed when you were quite young, and hadn't really ever looked into this condition properly before you started making this film. So I'm kind of like wondering what that process was like, of you both realizing more stuff about your own condition, but then also having to creatively translate that at the same time.
I think, well, firstly, it was a sort of strange way to go about a process that should be quite matter of fact in a way. You know, dived into meeting an expert and going around to a laboratory and seeing all the experiments they were doing for the future type of research. There's almost like jump 2 steps ahead. But I think the main thing that I found out was that the experience of lupus is so broad that it didn't feel, and that my experience is I had the luxury of not being able to look up the illness for many years. Other people are in different situations where they need to be a lot more engaged and know much more about their bodies in a way. That the experience of lupus is so broad that I felt that actually making work about lupus specifically was going to be, from my perspective, was not going to be universal, or not going to necessarily click for other people perhaps that had lupus. So instead, actually the film ended up going back to more my experience of diagnosis itself and what that feels like. And sort of, I think one of the feelings that's shown in the film is this feeling of like, of which translates to a lot of things, which is wanting to know something and wanting to know something about yourself or about the world. But when you find out that answer, that, you know, maybe that doesn't give you the answer that you want, and maybe the unknowing can be less scary, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't want to then know that thing. So I think that translates to a few different things. And so I think, you know, it's also got the sort of musical tropes of like finding out who you are and becoming something, and an idea of change, but also the idea of a sort of like beastiness and animalness, feeling strange, feeling different. So I think that's the kind of the feelings that actually came through, rather than necessarily the research about the lupus. But I felt that for me personally, it was important that I'd gone and done all that research before I made that film. But in the end, it's not necessarily a film particularly about lupus itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And did you, I mean, obviously you've talked about this a little bit, but what was your main reason to go for the musical form? And did you always know it was going to be like that?
I think, well, some things are just like, I love musicals and I like making musicals. I've made musical films and musical performances before, but generally I come from an artist moving image background, and sort of feel like I cross over between the sort of short film and cinema world and artist moving image world. And one thing which I really enjoy doing is making work which I know is going to sort of excite people and almost like trick them into like thinking one thing about the work but being another, whereas maybe sometimes artist moving image can be sometimes have sort of barriers or be quite sort of dense for people to sort of lean into and instantly just like engage with. And I just like that music is something which can bring people into work, and at first it can seem like it's going to be silly and absurd, but then actually there can be a lot more going on there. So it's a bit of a reason about what I want, you know, the audience to be experienced, and also just like if I want to make a film, I want there to be music in it. That's just how how I want to see a film. And I think it's also connected to that. I also run a Pollyanna, which is a queer cabaret company that's now also making moving image and film work, and that's just within my world.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think I've heard this from several people that I don't come across a lot of like exciting musical work in short film, so, and obviously this is a project that is part of Now and Next between BBC Scotland and Lux Scotland. So is that something when that was commissioned, was that sort of received with a lot of sort of immediate support, or were there questions about that form? Because I think it's quite different from anything else that they've supported, maybe.
I think that the process from BBC Scotland and Lux Scotland was really supportive, and in a way, in my head, it really made sense. Like BBC Scotland and Lux Scotland, that's kind of where I feel like kind of bridge that kind of moving image world and the more conventional, if to use that word, world. So no, but I don't think there's necessarily been other musical works of that I've seen. But it's a simple answer that yes, it was supported.
Amazing, cool. I'm going to move on to Caitlin. So you mentioned earlier that it's the film's been written by Jack Jehoul, who I didn't know that he had his own link to football. But I guess I would be interested to know more about like what attracted to you, and also what you then, like how you then learned and researched about trying to capture this quite masculine locker room space, as a woman.
Yeah, I suppose my first kind of thought with the script was that it was going to give me a challenge to translate that into how we would essentially have a silent character, and how we would navigate his story throughout. So yeah, I started there, and I'm really interested in like works like Todd Haynes' Carol, and how that's all about working with eye contact basically, and how you use your body language to translate what is essentially going on in someone's mind. So I found that really interesting, and I think that's where I started with it. And then I met with Lauren McDonald, who's the actor in Beats film, and he just brought something really interesting to it, because we talked a lot about the body language, and instead of, I suppose, a more traditional way of thinking about it, someone who is in a vulnerable situation is that they would maybe fight against it very quickly, but he kind of wanted to bring to the part a more laid back kind of approach to his body language, which I thought was really interesting. And then I think because he also plays football in real life with a guy Hodgson, who's plays the other character Charlie, who these two have a really close friendship, and it's their relationship together is slowly growing throughout the story. And so they wanted to work together, and I thought that was really interesting. And we had a few kind of little bits of auditions and stuff like that as well, which went really well. But yeah, I ultimately wanted to just put a lot of trust into them to kind of bring what their experiences as well, growing up in, I suppose, these kind of like toxic masculine kind of spaces, which is grassroots football and the locker room kind of thing. And obviously I'm a girl, and but I played hockey, and so I have a lot of experiences of my own of how that plays out in, I suppose, my own sport. And it's just funny as well, because obviously we had so many extras, because it was a whole boys team of like 11 of them. So it's funny how you also start to, even when we're filming, feel like the odd one out. And so it's interesting kind of how we all kind of played on to those kind of feelings like throughout the shoot as well. So yeah, it was quite interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on what you're saying with the rest of the casting. So obviously there's the two main guys, but then so the rest of the team, they're an actual football team? Or
basically this was a sport that me and Jack basically kick-started, and we basically wanted to do, because we both come kind of from advertising backgrounds, So we tried to use like our kind of campaign experiences to create this fun way of fundraising for it. So we didn't get any organization money for this project, but we still really wanted to make it. So we just went into this kind of full-blown campaign of like running up and down the steps of the top 12 SPFL like stadiums in Scotland. So we've spent like nearly 6 months like organizing all over the place with Scotland, like all the different stadiums. And then we went to like Rangers, Celtic, like the whole 12 of them, and ran up and down and raised the money from scratch. So we basically kind of took a grassroots, approach as well to how we would fundraise for it. And then we had a very interesting journey, because the script, it was there, but we wanted to kind of go out and try and get more understanding of what it would feel like for other members of the LGBT community. So Jack grew up playing with Tom Chalmers, who's basically created his own LGBT inclusive football team in Edinburgh called Hot Scots. And so we went and met with them, and he became one of our script consultants. And so it was really important for us to really go out there and kind of hear other people's stories and ask them whether the story as it stood resonated with them. And so it was really nice to hear some good feedback, and obviously then we would make changes based on that. So it was a really collaborative grassroots kind of experience from the start all the way through. So absolutely loved it. So it was really good.
Thank you very much. I am going to move on to Laura. So you mentioned earlier that you met Munzer on Isle of Bute. How did that meeting happen? Was it sort of by chance, or where did you go and look for this, for them as a main subject, I guess?
Well, I don't know if anyone's been to Bute, but when you go there, there's like shops and stuff like all along the front. When you come off the ferry, you can kind of see what's there. And as soon as I stepped off, I saw a bakery, and it was like a Syrian bakery. And then there's the salon, it says Syrian barber. And then there's a sort of takeaway restaurant. Again, it's like a Syrian takeaway. And I was kind of just like, oh, like it's so surreal if you've been on holiday to Syria and like no one's ever talked about it. But then obviously in the past 10 years, everyone's talking about it all the time. So going to Bute, it was surreal. And I went into all the different places, but in the barber shop, that was sort of, we met and we just sort of made friends straight away. It was almost like instantaneous. We just got on straight away. And like that day, he took me on a drive around the island. He was showing me around, invited me to his house for dinner. Like I met his wife and his kids. So it was kind of like, we just got on straight away. Yeah.
And then from there, how do you build, how do you build your trust in terms of telling a story? Because I think there's a lot of intimacy to it, especially when you're sort of in the domestic spaces. And I don't know if the footage you used, for example, is his footage.
That's actually my archive. So it's stuff that was filmed on it's like our home video footage, but like me and my editor went through it, and we were just trying to find like the most abstract images, if that makes sense. And but building trust. So kind of the way it went was I talked to him about my own family. That's really how like the connection was built. I told him about my young cousins who like they came with their mum. So my auntie, they did that journey from Turkey to Greece on a dinghy that was built for it's 10 people, but there was 40 people on it, and eventually ended up in Sweden. So talking about that and talking about how they've settled in Sweden, I think that was like a kind of instant, like a barrier breaker, if that makes any sense. Like people on Bute and people that he's met here, like locals, would say things to him like, oh, did you have a house in Syria? Were there roads in Syria? Like questions that are kind of crazy if you've been there and seen what it's like. It's a really beautiful place. So we kind of had a common, like a place of understanding straight away. And I think that that's why it was easy to build trust and to kind of sort of get the more intimate conversations that are in the film. Yeah.
Did you, in that the process of being, I don't know if you were there for a particular set amount of time or if you went back and forth quite a bit, but that, and then also did you get any further insight into some of the other families that ended up there around the same, it's 2015, I guess, like around the same time, and sort of, I don't know, did you manage to speak to other people there about that, the identity conflict, I guess that's sort of at the core of the story?
Yeah, so I went back quite a few times. It was kind of like I'd go and do a week of filming and leave for a few weeks, then go back for another week and then leave. And yeah, I made friends with the people in the bakery as well. I was eating that bakery every time that I was there. It's such a good, like, sort of like French patisserie sort of thing. It's called Helmy's if anyone ever wants to go. But yeah, so I got to know the family who run the bakery quite well. And also Munzer's kids, like I got on with his kids straight away too. And I don't know if it's because my cousins were a similar age when they came over, but it was just, yeah, I felt like they were family. We kept saying it was weird. It just felt like family because I've not seen my own family now who were in Syria for 10 years. Everyone's completely scattered and spread out all over the world. I'm at the moment sort of reconnecting with my cousin who's in Canada. And we were talking about the fact that we've not seen each other since I was 16 and she was 19. So it's kind of, it was like I was hanging on to this sort of connection with him, if that makes any sense.
No, that's really, yes, it's really lovely. Thank you for that. I'm aware of time, so I'm going to move on to Douglas so that we can kind of join it all up afterwards. So yeah, you talked earlier about Rosie, obviously, who's written the script for Do No Harm, and she had a wonderful chat with us on the mental health panel on Wednesday. So I'm just wondering how you worked with her and because you know she's written that script from personal experience, having OCD, and how you work to get a personal view like that across while also having to hit these notes of a hybrid genre release. So I was wondering if you could speak about that.
Well, it was a real process. Like the script at the very start is pretty different from where we got to, and I think that there was a couple of sort of guiding principles that me and Rosie had that we kind of felt we had lots of sort of objectives that we wanted to hit with, not just in regards to pacing or sort of genre. It was also just me spending a hell of a lot of time trying to, as part of my research with this, I just spoke to Rosie for ages and ages and ages, trying to get to the bottom of her subjective experience and what it feels like to be caught in this OCD loop. And then I kind of paired that up with a wee bit of like more objective stuff, like reading about OCD. And I got a brilliant book called The Man Who Couldn't Stop, which gave me some other ideas as well. But we really developed it hand in hand. But because we didn't have to write down these objectives, we just spoke about them so many times that it was ingrained in both of us where like our north was, and it was the same for each of us, and both of us felt the same way of protecting it. So when we were going through the development process, that was very, very rigorous, and a lot of the times it felt like we went for a good few cul-de-sacs on the way, but we were always able to bring each other back onto that track. Because at first it was almost like silent cinema, and it was only Beth, played by Claudia Blakely, who was brilliant in the film, and it was just her. But then we were sort of starting to get towards a two-hander type thing, and we really didn't know quite what to do with this extra character. So at one point it was an older alcoholic male, and then after a while I was like, this is just tipping the whole film in a completely wrong direction for us. And I've always been a huge fan of Sharon Rooney, and I thought, well, we could do whatever we want with this. So we started that character from scratch. But it was almost as if, because of the rigor of it all, we had to effectively pitch a lot of this stuff. And I think that, me and Rosie sort of just were a good team there. It wasn't all we still had like arguments, and it wasn't exactly all it was, we were rigorous as well. But eventually we got there with the script, and then the shoot itself, like I've shot a feature film for like no money at all, no budget feature film, and the hardest day on a no budget feature film is nowhere near like the easiest day on Do No Harm. It was unbelievable how difficult it was, with locations dropping out and all sorts. And effectively, because of how constrained it was, Rosie said this, I can't believe it's out in the open now, but we did kind of not secretly, but we kind of banned Rosie from the set because it was just going to be way too extreme. And I still feel kind of bad about this because it's the first film that she's actually got into production. And I had a whole plan of like a nice Saturday for her to come along, but it turned into something quite insane, which actually really doubles up with the theme of the film. But even throughout that, like Rosie was so good at thinking on her feet, but because the schedule was just instantly no schedule, it was really just thinking about what we could do with the time we had. It was actually a very creative experience, and I was able to bring Rosie in on that as well. And if I had an idea for something that we'd film later on that night, I just gave her a ring and said, "Can you just give me a page on this?" And she was like, "Yeah, that's great. I'll go and take this, and we'll have like a 5-minute discussion." Then she would email me stuff back and forth, and it was a good experience. But I think we were both absolutely wiped from it, and it was quite mirrored as well, because when she was in the writing stage, I feel like I was trying to support Rosie as much as I could, and then when it came to the editing stage, that was very much flipped, and she really backed me when it took a long time to get the film into the shape I was looking for, but again, we supported each other well.
And could you talk a bit about the locations you used? Because it looks like it was quite an ambitious shoot. So I was wondering if you could talk about it.
It was ambitious enough without locations falling through for us. Like, we had one location fall through a few days beforehand where we're going to build the set for the lab. And then I ended up in Possil in this warehouse at 10 p.m. at night trying to pitch to this guy, so please can we shoot in your warehouse? And I was waiting in the car. I was like, I should probably text someone, let them know where I am right now. And but then eventually we got that, put out that fire. And then the next day, when I thought everything was okay, then we had a whole other location fall through on us. And that was when we really had to start thinking on our feet. But what I would say is that I've got this fantastic, I've got this video storyboard, which I'm so glad that I did as part of my pre-production. I brought in a great friend called Emily Benita, who stood in as a Beth character. And it was just me and Andrew O'Connor who shot the film. And we just spent the entire time in our location that we thought we had secured and went through scene by scene. I was obsessed with geography. I wanted this film is 40% corridors. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knew what corridor we were in and why. I'm so glad I did that. But I've got that clip, so I might do a wee side-by-side video for Instagram or something just to show you the corridors that I was pining for and still kind of secretly mourn for, and the corridors that we ended up in, which was also with Sharon Rooney, who's brilliant. There was one point where I was asking her to go and stand next to this fire exit, and I could tell that she was a wee bit uncomfortable there. So I was like, I thought I better just go and say hi to Sharon, see if she's all right. And as soon as I came out, it was just a wall of urine, like a big pishy smell. And I realised that it was the other side of it was there was a pub right next door, and we were filming on Sunday morning, and basically it was a mixture of stale and fresh pee. So she was just off the back of Dumbo. So she was saying Tim would never ask me to stand in a pool of piss. So that was that location. I think we made it work, but I'd scheduled I was hoping to have 2 days with the corridors, and we ended up with not even one full day. So it was a bit insane. We had to write a scene on the spot pretty much. The lift scene was something that I had to come up with within about 10 minutes just to carry through the concept of what was originally a page and a half scene.
Thanks, Douglas. I've got a few audience questions, but I first wanted to maybe ask if all of you, or those who've been able to see each other's films, had any questions for each other. Feel free to jump in or raise your hand. Or
I would say I'm just jumping straight in. Caitlin, that sounds amazing how you funded that film. So did you run up all? Did you and your producer run up all these stairs, and it was like, and you got sponsored for it, or did you? How did that work?
Yes, so we basically, as part, because I'm really interested in, social impact filmmaking, so we thought we'd add another challenge to our schedule by fundraising for Stonewall as well at the same time. So basically, yeah, we kind of did it for Stonewall, and so that we could fundraise for them, and then partly to make our film as well. And we basically just created our own, like it was just me and Jack, and we just literally drove to each of the 12 stadiums and ran up every single step. So like, yeah, Celtic and Rangers were taking like 3.5 hours each. And then we tried to like pull in people to just make it a bit more interesting, because it was getting a bit samey, just taking videos of each other like running up and down steps. But so yeah, I got really fit, which was great. Jack was calling it like from what was it? From fat to fab. So yeah, we basically made the short film for $5,000, which I'm really proud of, because it was hell on earth to make it for that cheap, amount. And we just pulled in a lot of favors. So that side of it's really hard, I think, when you don't have some more support with money. But yeah, it's great. We're lucky to have a lot of people that we knew in the industry that could come in and help us. But yeah, there's only so many favors you can ask.
I seen that Amanda McGoldrick was your dubbing mixer, and she's been amazing for me. She's worked on so many of my films, so it was great to see. I think she's fantastic. So it was great to see.
She works or worked with Jack at STV, so we pulled in a few favors from the STV lot. So thank you to them.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm gonna just purely because we're on sound. There was a question from Jamie for Douglas about to tell us about the music, saying the soundtrack is fantastic.
Oh, I'm glad. Thanks, Jamie, for asking about the score. So originally we had a track that I absolutely loved, and I remember finding it, and I played it to Rosie, and I said, how's this for an idea? And she was just basically saying that was so tied into to how the experience of almost borderline panic, and the loop that was part of it. And we actually came into our pitch meeting with a little speaker and just blasted this tune out, and that was part of our pitch. But then it took so long, this process, that by the time I got into the edit, this song had been used in 8th grade and a Netflix series. And I was just, I can't believe this. But also, there was a tad of arrogance with me as well, because I used the Pictish Trail, gave me lots of instrumentals for Super November, and I was able to sort of manipulate all these instrumentals into a score for that film. So I thought I could do the same with this track. And really I couldn't, because it was just one note, which was just Panic Attack. So when that really became apparent, Alexandra Hamilton Ayres, she'd sent me a lovely message on Facebook like about a year previous to it, and I've just been following her work. And to be honest, I don't think she's really done anything quite like what's in Do No Harm, but I just really trusted her taste. And I think the best thing about Do No Harm is the collaborators that I've had to work with, and Alexandra's right up there for me. She was brilliant. I had a lot of fun. I don't know anything about music. I'm amazed at how people put together music. So I think my main note was just big to start with, and then lots of Panic Attack type things. And then we kind of just built it up from there, and we tried a lot of things in the mix, which was a lot of fun as well. But yeah, I'm really, really pleased with the score. I think there was a version which was a bit calmer that we were playing with, and it's funny with Rosie, because her radar is very sensitive. So I remember I took out one cue, and she said that's not OCD anymore. And it was just one little cue, and she said the film. Honestly, she was saying the film is gone for me now. Like, you've betrayed me, and I think the music plays a massive part to it. It was the last thing that we put on, but I think it's a core part of the film. If anyone's watching film, please watch it with headphones. It's a great experience.
And maybe on music as well, Adam, quickly to come back to you, like your performance, who the performers were they from? Where did you find them? And did you write the song lyrics and come up with the sing lines and everything?
So Margaret, who is in the film, actually works in the NHS. So that was really great for me to have somebody that comes from a health perspective. And then Scott works a lot in musicals, so he's very much from the musicals perspective. So that was a nice mix. I worked closely with Aidan Teplitsky for the last 2 or 3 projects, who's a brilliant composer. And for this project, I did write the lyrics with some support from Aidan, and then Aidan created the music. But I famously said to my family, I'm going to make a musical about sort of 4 years ago, and they all laughed at me because they knew that I can't sing or write music or anything. So yeah, it's very much a collaboration process, and a lot of me like sending voice notes, like I want it to sound a bit like this, trying to sing something, and Aidan sending something back, which is either, oh, that's what I meant, but much better, or that's nothing what I meant, but that's so much better. Sometimes, you know, back and forth, like disagreeing on things, but yeah, that's the process of that.
Thank you. And then I've got a question for Julia from Colin. Did you see any downsides to the community, and could you see yourself making a longer film on the subject?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough for me personally. It was really tough because it feels like it's the end of the world. It takes ages to get there, and I guess if you're young, you don't think so much about the health aspect. But if there is an emergency, I know that there are the helicopters that can get there, but you know, it's still really, really remote, and I guess that's something to consider if you want to go and live there. Same thing if you have small children, because there was actually a family that lived there for 10 years and left just a year before. Unfortunately, I missed them. I would have loved to talk to them, but they had to move out because the kids had to go to secondary school, and so there wasn't any school nearby, and so that's why they had to move out. But when they were there, they were at the beginning, their parents were homeschooling them, and then after that they had to go to Mal. And so on Mal there was a school, but it took them like, I don't know, ridiculous amounts of time to get there every day, and they had to boat them over in the morning to get to Mal. So it's crazy. But I guess that's something not so radical, but there are other islands on the west coast of Scotland. They're very, very isolated. So it is fascinating, and it is a bit scary at the same time. And also the weather is not forgiving. It's raining all the time, and the wind is really strong. And there was a bit of a struggle because of filming. Like, it was really, really hard to film. It was just sunny, and 5 minutes later it was just pouring raining, and so yeah, it was really challenging. But I guess that's also the beauty of it. It feels really like rough and like really raw on your skin being there, so I felt like a bit purified in a way. I don't know, a bit fresher after being there. So yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm gonna wrap up here unless any of you have anything you want to ask each other very quickly. I'm right within time, so I'm very proud. But thank you all for being here, and thank you everyone who's watched. I also wanted to still flag up that anyone who's watching this live can still go to our Instagram, because Laura Carrera did a takeover earlier, so you can find out more about the shift with I think Anna, your actress, put some stuff on there as well. So for anyone who wants to check that out. And yeah, thank you all very much for being here. Have a good evening.